Good evening. You're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Coming up, after days of speculation and controversy, Donald Trump has finally met with Volodymyr Zelensky. Is there any chance the pair could form an unlikely peace pact? More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Poland is still grappling with the impact of this month's floods. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán grants a record loan to North Macedonia, but what's in it for him? And a second Polish astronaut is set to fly to space, but financial issues with the company involved could threaten the mission. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has met with former US President Donald Trump, despite the two trading jabs in recent days. Zelensky insisted on the meeting taking place, as Trump could return to the White House after November's election.
This was a meeting of necessity rather than courtesy. The two leaders haven't seen eye to eye in recent days, but that was nowhere to be seen when they spoke with reporters ahead of the discussion.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to have the president with us, and he's been through a lot. He's been through a tremendous amount, like probably nobody else, almost nobody else in history, if you really get right down to it. And we're going to have a discussion and see what we can come up with, but a great honor to have you with us. Thank you very much.
The Ukrainian leader knows his chances of defending his country against Russia would be dramatically lower without the aid of the United States. And the Republican candidate isn't the biggest fan of continuing the military and financial support for Kyiv. According to Polish former ambassador to Canada, the meeting was a smart move from President Zelensky.
6 weeks before elections, the US presidential race is basically a tie. So it might go either way. Trump might win.
The meeting was uncertain until the very last moment, as President Zelensky and former President Trump have both taken jabs at each other in public statements over the past several days.
Every time Zelensky comes to the United States, he walks away with $100 billion. I think he's the greatest salesman on earth.
Donald Trump doesn't really know how to stop the war.
To add fuel to fire, the Republicans recently criticized Zelensky's visit to an arms factory in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The Ukrainian president was accompanied at the important swing state by several top Democrats, including Governor Josh Shapiro. The swing states in the Midwest are also heavily populated by the Polish diaspora. The votes of nearly 3 million Poles could be important for both candidates, which is reflected in the campaign speeches.
History has shown us, if we allow aggressors like Putin to take land with impunity, they keep going. And Putin could set his sights on Poland, the Baltic states, and other NATO allies.
Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and current US President Joe Biden met with President Zelensky on Thursday. During the meeting, the Ukrainian leader presented his victory plan to the US leader. The details of the plan haven't been released to the public. Here in Warsaw, it's been rather clear that these US elections will be some of the most important elections in decades. American voters will make their choice on November 5th. From Warsaw, TVP World, Kazimierz Łysiak.
It's been a big week for President Zelensky, from meeting with high-ranking American politicians to giving a speech at the United Nations. So how is Zelensky's trip to America being viewed in Ukraine? Joining me now is our correspondent, Oz Chatterjee. Good evening, Oz. What's the feeling in Kyiv about this visit?
Good evening. Well, up to now, everything's been going pretty well for Zelensky. Still no real commitments on allowing strikes inside Russian territory, but his speech at the UN will be seen as a success. His meeting with Biden, this new aid package that's going to be released soon from the United States as well, announced during his visit, all going well for Kyiv so far. This meeting with Trump today has, shall we say, rather awkward undertones. Zelensky often cut a awkward figure standing beside Trump, while Trump rambled about many things, including his impeachment over the Ukraine aid issue scandal, trying to dig up dirt on Hunter Biden. He also said that repeatedly said that he was going to strike a good deal, that he has a good relationship with Vladimir Putin. At which point Zelensky interjected and said, "Well, I hope we have a good relationship ourselves, you know." But again, you can see alongside me here the pictures of how awkward this press conference was. It certainly wasn't a warm conference. And Zelensky's comments over the recent days haven't been particularly unfair. When he said Donald Trump doesn't know how to end the war, it's true. Donald Trump often is rambling, incoherent, says things that are demonstrably untrue. So the idea that he could strike some sort of easy peace negotiations with Putin are quite fanciful, particularly to the way Kiev views it. So look, this is a marriage of convenience here. If Donald Trump comes into the White House, Kiev needs a strategy to move forward with that. But I think it should be clear from the last few days that Kiev does view the White House race and does have a preferred candidate. And I don't think it's Donald Trump.
Those pictures certainly look like a marriage of convenience. Thank you, Oz Chatterjee, our correspondent in Kiev. Fire brigades and the military are busy securing embankments as the Oder River continues to rise. It comes after floods devastated southwestern Poland last week. Here's our reporter on the ground, Marek Steele.
We're patrolling the river Oder in the city of Kostrzyn nad Odrą. This is on the Polish-German border. The water levels here in the Oder River are exceeding 5 meters. They're currently at 5 meters 20 centimeters. But from what the firemen here tell me is that the water may reach 5.5 meters today. This is the culmination point for this region of the flood wave that has been flowing from southwestern Poland. We know there are many cities and towns were flooded last week, and now this flood wave came here. What's interesting is that this place is just a few hundred meters from where the river Oder meets the river Warta. So the high flood wave and the Oder flowed into the Warta River upstream in that very point. What the fire brigade here tells me is that the Warta took millions of cubic meters of water, which allowed these places here to be safer. However, we've seen some buildings be flooded here, and the firemen have here, together with the military, placed 5 kilometers of temporary embankments from sandbags, as you can see here, along the river, so that those points that are the lowest and the closest to the river are safer. This wave is currently entering from the Lubuskie region to the western Pomerania. From the Oder River, Marek Steele, TVP World.
Israel has attacked Hezbollah's headquarters in the Lebanese capital of Beirut. Local media are reporting that dozens have been killed, with many buildings destroyed to rubble. According to Lebanon's health ministry, more than 700 people have been killed this week, as Israel maintains the escalation of strikes is designed to target Hezbollah's military capacities and senior commanders.
13-year-old Abdallah is among those who were taken to hospital in southern Lebanon for treatment following Israeli strikes that started Monday. He is one of the lucky ones, as he managed to survive.
The shops behind us were hit by the airstrike. The young boy who was with me was martyred, and I'm still alive.
Israel is currently fighting on 2 fronts, against the Iran-backed Hezbollah group in Lebanon and against the Palestinian Islamist Hamas in Gaza, where an Israeli airstrike on a school sheltering displaced families in the northern Gaza Strip killed at least 14 people on Thursday.
As you can see, the school was safe and there were people selling items here, and we were shocked to see 2 rockets strike the school and shake us like an earthquake. It was a shocking massacre, where body parts were everywhere.
Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saw many delegates leave as he took his turn to speak at the United Nations General Assembly on Friday.
Order, please.
Other delegations offered such strong applause that it had to be gavelled down, showing just how divided people are on the Israel-Gaza war. Friday also saw the Palestinian president address the United Nations General Assembly.
We regret that the United States obstructed 3 times Security Council resolutions demanding Israel to observe a ceasefire.
On Thursday, Israel said it had secured an $8.7 billion aid package from the United States to support its ongoing military efforts. Multiple Israeli tanks and armored vehicles were seen in the country's north on Friday, after the country's military chief said its air force would continue to assist any possible cross-border ground operation in Lebanon, stoking fears of an all-out regional war. The IDF said on Friday that it had targeted Hezbollah's central headquarters in southern Beirut. According to local media, there are possibly dozens dead and many buildings razed to the ground by the Israeli shelling.
Finland and Estonia have pledged to strengthen their cooperation to protect underwater energy infrastructure in the wake of several incidents on the Baltic Sea.
A memorandum of understanding between Finland and Estonia has been signed in response to last year's damage of the Baltic connector, a natural gas pipeline and communications cable linking Finland with Estonia. But there have been some more alarming situations on the Baltic Sea, which propelled both countries to take action.
Let's not forget the Nord Stream incident either. And also there might be some accidents, there might be some other reasons why critical infrastructure is damaged.
2 years ago, the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline connecting Russia with Germany sent shockwaves across the world after it was rendered inoperable. Then, last year, the Baltic connector, a 77-kilometer conduit between Estonia and Finland, was impaired after a Chinese vessel ruptured it with an anchor, purportedly by accident. But the damage to the pipeline coincided with the destruction of the submarine communications cable between Estonia and Sweden. Both incidents raised questions over maritime surveillance of underwater energy connections.
Of course, the enemies don't sleep, and it also shows that this is an important part of the Central and Eastern Europe infrastructure. So the sea will be now more and more attacked.
Though the memorandum of understanding does not seem to have a profound impact immediately, it is expected to translate into measurable effects in the long run.
How we protect the infrastructure, how we monitor the critical energy infrastructure, and how we could possibly, for example, cooperate still more closely in repair of these connections.
The future of the bi-directional natural gas pipeline Baltic connector is particularly salient for Finland, as it is the first and so far the only gas interconnector that links the Nordic country to the European grid.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has visited North Macedonia for a summit between the two governments. Along with trade and migration talks, Orbán also backed Skopje's bid for EU membership.
Orban's endorsement came after reports were revealed that Albania will be continuing its EU accession process independently from Skopje. Up until now, both countries had been in the process together, but Bulgaria's veto keeps blocking North Macedonia's path to the Union.
And that is why I believe it's a mistake that you are still not a member of the European Union, and it is also a mistake that you are being separated from negotiations with another candidate country.
Some experts say that this is Orban's way of showing the EU that Hungary has stakes in the accession process.
Viktor Orban has not been helpful in the enlargement process unless he would see that the EU would be accepting the Balkan countries in particular within the baggage of corruption, mafia states.
These countries could potentially expand Hungary's influence in the region.
This is to create little Hungary concepts around the core Hungary if these countries would be successfully joining the EU.
However, Hungarian influence extends beyond political endorsement. Orban's visit comes on the heels of a loan of €500 million to North Macedonia, which was supplied a week prior by a Hungarian bank.
A loan that was speculated by investigative journalist site V-Square to be coming from China. So actually, Hungary is suspected fronting Chinese credits to the newly elected government party.
This move could be another step in Hungary's economic neutrality policy.
They want to deal at the same time with China as with the EU, which in the era of the competing between the blocs seems to be less and less feasible.
Orban's support for North Macedonia comes during the Hungarian presidency in the EU Council. After Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the EU started membership talks with countries from the Western Balkans as a part of a new enlargement strategy.
A second Polish astronaut is set to make history next year by travelling to space, but financial troubles faced by one of the companies involved could put the mission in jeopardy.
3, 2, 1, ignition, engine full power.
After 3 successful trips to the International Space Station, the AX-4 mission, organised by Axiom Space, is on the calendar for spring 2025. The mission holds particular significance for Poland, as astronaut Sławomir Zelensky is expected to take part, marking the first time in nearly 50 years that a Polish national would fly to space. However, there are concerns. A recent Forbes report reveals that Axiom Space, the Houston-based company involved in the mission, is facing financial difficulties. It's been reported that they've been unable to pay wages to their employees and still own $670 million to SpaceX. These financial struggles have cast doubt over Axiom's ability to follow through on its promises, including the construction of a low Earth orbit space station module that has already faced multiple delays, as well as downsizing. When asked for a comment by the Polish press agency, the European Space Agency said that it is certain that the mission will proceed as planned.
If you're a fan of cinema and the arts, you're in the right place. The 49th Polish Film Festival is underway, with 16 movies competing for the main prize, the Golden Lion. The themes in this year's edition include the war in Ukraine and dealing with Polish history.
Here in Gdynia, the 49th Polish Film Festival is in its penultimate day. One of the movies that's hotly anticipated that might scoop up the main prize is Mingun. It's a story of love and loss, where the main character is coping with the loss of his dear daughter with the help of his father-in-law. The main character is Polish and the father-in-law is Chinese. Through the process of Chinese ritual of Mingun, they are trying to find the love, the husband for the daughter, in not just in this life, but forever after, in the afterlife. Let's look how the film's director told during the press conference of what drew him into the story.
In a way, this is a story of a man who represents Western culture and who is a Pole, which is a completely new kind of experience, also a geopolitical one. He must face what comes from the East, the unknown, which is both curious and very concerning.
Marcin Dorociński is the movie star. The camera almost never leaves his face. He told at the press conference how this very intimate movie showed spirituality, mostly through his facial expressions.
I remember very precisely what happened each day, what I saw, and I remember what I had thought to myself. I think that had helped us all, even though it was all very difficult.
Mingun, a truly intimate story of the greatest love, love that goes beyond this world and into the next, is certainly a one to watch. I'm Karolina Szapland, here in Gdynia for TVP World.
The clock is ticking down to November's US presidential election, and one country with a lot at stake is Ukraine. As we've covered extensively in tonight's programme, President Volodymyr Zelensky has been on a charm offensive in America, meeting with both presidential nominees Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. So what was he trying to achieve, and did he achieve it? Joining me now is Alberto Cole, Professor at DePaul University College of Law. Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, we finally got that Zelensky-Trump meeting, but did either of them really want to sit down with the other?
Well, Zelensky is a very smart politician. He knows he needed to sit down with Donald Trump, and so he did that. What he privately thinks of Donald Trump, that's anybody's guess. And Trump is not particularly fond of Zelensky either, but Trump understands that, Ukraine is important. So in spite of Trump's rhetoric about Ukraine in the past, Trump knows that if he wins the election, he will have to deal with the problem of Ukraine. And I think Zelensky played his cards well. I think Zelensky made a couple of missteps during this trip. Number one, he fell into the media's trap of giving some opinions about what he thinks of J.D. Vance. And he should not have done that. He should keep to himself whatever he thinks of the Republican candidate for vice president. And secondly, that trip that Zelensky took to the ammunition factory in Pennsylvania with only Democrats was not a wise move. He basically got entangled into the presidential campaign. And once Zelensky knew that there were not going to be any Republicans along on that trip, he should have just called off the trip to the factory. Other than that, Zelensky is doing his best. He's trying to reach to both parties, and that's smart of him to do.
So did Zelensky achieve what he set out to do on this trip?
Look, you cannot measure these trips just by one result. Zelensky has an uphill battle to climb because he keeps coming back asking for more support, which Ukraine desperately needs. And even President Biden, even if Kamala Harris were to win in November, she's going to need Republican support for more aid to Ukraine. And within the Republican Party, there are those who believe that the Europeans should step up to the plate some more. So the conversation has to be really turned back to Europe. The European economy, the European Union has a GDP 7 times larger than that of Russia. And that's not including the United Kingdom, which if we add that, they're a military ally, would mean an economy 8 or 9 times larger than that of Russia. So Europe needs to be providing significantly more aid than it is. And that means the European leaders have to be straight with their publics and say, hey, we need to rearm. We need to start spending more money seriously, not just on defense, but on upgrading our industrial base. And that will be very helpful also in getting those U.S. skeptics of more aid to Ukraine on board. So this is a big job. Zelensky is not going to get that done in just a month. But he's going to keep coming back to the States, and his idea is to keep Ukraine on the agenda to remind Americans, as he does very effectively, that Ukraine matters to the United States security. It's not just a matter of morality for the United States. More than morality, it's a matter of our own national security is at stake in whatever happens ultimately to Ukraine.
Of course, Europe needs to do its part, and there are many here that will say Europe needs to do more, but it does rely on those security guarantees from the US. How critical is this election for Ukraine and its prospects in its fight against Russia?
Well, so I think either candidate, whoever wins, is going to have questions having to do with strategy. I mean, for example, imagine for a moment that Kamala Harris wins the election, True, so far the Biden-Harris administration has been willing to support Ukraine, but again, the question is now, what kind of strategy do we have over the long term to ensure Ukrainian victory? And part of the problem with the Biden-Harris administration is that it has been giving Ukraine weapons, but a little too late and not enough of them. And so what we know is that there's going to have to be some kind of a political settlement. We're going to have to persuade Russia at some point that we mean to stay in this for the long run. And to do that, we need that political will. So imagine a scenario in which Trump wins. He said that, he's going to solve the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Of course, this is hyperbole. He's always using hyperbole. But I do think that Trump will push Ukraine to sit down. But also, of course, Russia has to be willing to sit down. So far, we don't have any evidence that Russia is willing to sit down. And also the question for Ukraine will be, okay, what kind of a peace deal are they prepared to accept? It's one thing to give up some territory to the Russians, let's say territory that they're already holding. But Ukraine is going to insist that for it to do that, it will need some very serious security guarantees from the United States and Europe, so that in the future, Russia does not repeat what it did on February 2022. These are incredibly complicated questions. It's easy to say, well, it's better off the Democrats win the election, Ukraine will be better off, but that's not altogether clear. The Democrats are still going to need Republican support. And at the end of the day, that support requires that Europe step up more and that, again, we develop a strategy. If we're going to keep helping Ukraine, we have to also give it weapons that are sufficient at least to convince Russia that we are in it for the long haul, that this is not something that we're going to get tired of.
You mentioned there Kamala Harris and the scenario where she's voted in. I mean, as much as Trump has been criticised for his inflammatory rhetoric around the war, is Kamala Harris the one that will be able to end it?
We don't know. I mean, we don't know. Trump could as easily be the one that ends it because, there's a scenario in which, Trump is going to come in as president, but he's also going to wind up surrounding himself with advisors. The people who actually carry out policy in this country are often policy professionals. And in the Republican Party, that means some very hawkish national security professionals who do not want to give Russia an easy victory. And so Trump may come in, do his grand diplomatic gesture. He's big at that. He tried that with North Korea. It didn't quite work the way he thought it would. But he's going to try the grand gesture. And then the people around him are going to say, okay, boss, you cannot let Putin win this one. You don't want to be known, boss, as the man who gave the whole of Ukraine to Putin. I think this will play to Trump's ego, to his own interest in a historical legacy. And at the end of the day, Trump may figure out that, after trying, that Putin, the only way to get Putin to the table is to give Ukraine the really tough weapons that the Biden team has been unwilling to give to it. And then after a while, there may be a negotiation, and you may see a settlement of sorts. But again, it would have to be coupled with promises that the United States and NATO and our European allies will be prepared to step up to Ukraine's aid with ironclad guarantees.
Kamala Harris says if Ukraine gives up territory, it's a formula for surrender, not peace. But under Donald Trump, he'll likely try and end the war much quicker, presumably by pressuring Ukraine into making concessions. I mean, these are two vastly different positions. Should Europe be worried about such extreme political uncertainty?
Look, this is a campaign. It's a political campaign. Kamala Harris knows as well as everybody else, okay? But she cannot say it because she's running for an election. She knows that it's going to be almost impossible to dislodge the Russians from that 20% of territory they occupy. The Russians have proven very good at building defensive fortifications, and it's going to be extremely difficult to push them out of those positions that they already control. Crimea perhaps might be an exception. It might be possible to isolate them there and dislodge them from Crimea, but it's going to be just about impossible right now. Everybody knows that. Kamala Harris cannot say that. But Trump has had the temerity to say it. Say, yeah, look, Ukraine is going to have to give up some land. So the idea is not whether Ukraine is going to have to give up some land, but whether Ukraine, when it gives up some land, also gets in return from the West the kinds of military and economic support that make it impossible for Russia in the future to try to attack it again. And so that Ukraine can emerge as a very strong kind of what we call a porcupine state, a state, look at Israel as an example, okay? A state that is, even though it's smaller than Russia, will be so militarily capable and economically strong over time that Russia will be unable to try to conquer it.
We're running out of time, but I do want to finish on a quote from Trump. I believe I will be able to make a deal between Putin and Zelensky quite quickly. Just one word from you, Professor. Realistic or delusional?
No, I mean, again, this is a campaign. Each candidate will use these kinds of sweeping rhetorical statements. Of course, it's not going to be quick. It's not going to be quick, and Putin is not going to sit down quickly. And if he does, it's going to be play acting. Okay, yeah, of course, the Russians will say, yeah, we're ready to sit down and negotiate a reasonable. And the devil is in the details. So yeah, I don't expect miracles from either candidate. And I do expect, though, that either way, whoever becomes the president will have to deal with the very tough issues of sustaining Ukrainian independence and sustaining over the long haul a Ukrainian state that can effectively, with the help of its allies, deter Russia from future aggression. And that's the key here. We're out to contain Russia. We're out to keep Russia from depriving Ukraine of its independence. And we also long-term want a strong Ukrainian state that is part of the European Union and that contributes to our peace, our prosperity, and our common freedom.
Alberto Cole, always a pleasure. Professor at DePaul University College of Law, thank you again for your time.
You're quite welcome. Delighted.
And stay with us here on TVP World, because right after a short break, I'll be back right here, filling in for Adam Yasser to host our new feature talk show, On the Record. You will not want to miss this. But for now, that's World News Tonight. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.